I was adjusting blueprints at my desk when I looked up at the news, and there they were. My wife and my best friend stepping out of a motel room, caught on live TV. I was adjusting the dimensions of a wall layout on my monitor that afternoon, fully locked into my work when the sound of a news anchor caught my attention. I glanced up at the TV in the corner of the office, expecting the usual background noise. But the words "homicide in Ocala" made my ears perk up. Then I saw it, clear as day. The camera panned out to a wide shot, and there in the background, almost like ghosts from my personal life, were two very familiar figures stepping out of a cheap-looking motel. It was my wife, Sally, and right beside her was David. David Fisher, my best friend since college. The whole room felt like it tilted. My first thought was that it had to be some sort of mistake. Sally had told me earlier she was leaving work early to do some shopping. Dave? He was supposed to be in Gainesville, checking on one of our job sites. Neither of them were supposed to be anywhere near Ocala. But there they were, plain as daylight, walking out of a place that needed no explanation. I froze. My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it. 100 thoughts exploded in my head all at once. I tried to come up with innocent reasons they might be there together, but none of them held water. Still, I knew I couldn't jump to conclusions without solid proof. Accusations without facts would just make me look paranoid, or worse. This came out of nowhere. I had absolutely no warning signs. Sally and I had been married for 14 years. Dave and his wife, Mary, had been our closest friends for a solid decade. We did everything together. The three of us, Sally, Dave, and I, had even started our architectural firm from scratch, built it up from late nights and ramen noodles to something we could all be proud of. Dave handled the on-site management, making sure construction was going according to my plans. I was the design guy, earned my degree in architecture and took on the creative side. Sally, she ran the business, kept the operations tight and the finances on track. We were a strong team both professionally and socially. Outside of work, the four of us would often get together for dinner, vacations, or just a quiet night in with wine and cards. We were like family. Things really took off about 4 years back. I'd been recognized with a major design award for a new city hall project I led. After that, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Bigger clients, bigger budgets, and bigger expectations came rolling in. We had to scale up quickly, went from a small crew to a full-fledged firm with 12 architects under me. It was a whirlwind. Eventually, we decided it was time to move into our own place. We designed and built a 7-story building from the ground up. Our firm took over the entire top floor and we leased out the other 6. That rental income helped cover the mortgage and left us with a tidy profit each month. It was the kind of success story most folks dream about, and we had all invested our savings into it from the start. Everything looked perfect, on paper. But that one moment on the TV, that quick flash of Sally and Dave sneaking out of a motel, it cracked something open in me. And no matter how much I tried to glue it back together with logic or excuses, something inside me just knew. Everything was about to change. When we pooled our money to launch the firm, I contributed half of the initial capital. Sally put in about a quarter and Dave covered the rest. At that point, I was juggling around 20 major design projects, working long days and often staying late to meet deadlines. I had managed to stay ahead of schedule and was actually planning to ease up a bit. But that afternoon's unexpected revelation completely scrambled my thoughts. I couldn't focus, I just kept replaying what I saw on that news broadcast. Then something strange happened. The receptionist knocked on my door and mentioned that a small package had arrived, addressed to Mr. John Nelson. That's me. Inside was a DVD. No note. No sender. Just the disc. Curiosity and dread made me slide it into the computer. I watched it once. Then again. And then a third time just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. That's when I noticed a detail I'd somehow missed during the live broadcast. Just before the anchor's voice drew my attention to the story, the video had already been showing Sally and Dave. But this time I caught it clearly. They were inside the doorway of room 116 sharing a kiss. It was brief but unmistakable. They stood there behind the reporter, clearly thinking no one would ever notice. But there it was, frozen in time. I sat back stunned. How had I not seen it earlier? More importantly, how had I missed all the signs leading up to this? My thoughts spiraled. If they were willing to betray me like this, what else could they be hiding? Could they be siphoning money from the business? Was this more than just a personal betrayal? My mind was racing and I knew I couldn't make accusations without evidence. Sally handled all the financials for the company. I'd always trusted her implicitly. Never once thought to double-check the books. But now, I needed a forensic audit, and fast. I couldn't risk tipping her off. The only way to get access without raising suspicion was to somehow get both her and Dave out of town. That's when I remembered something. Sally and I were scheduled to attend the Southeastern Architects Association conference for 3 days at the end of next week. It was perfect. I'd go with her, keep things as normal as possible on the surface, and in the meantime hire someone discreet to comb through the books back home. But before any of that could happen, something else rattled me. That week we had our usual dinner with Dave and Mary. Everything was casual, at least on the surface. But I noticed something that made my stomach drop. We were sitting around the table when Mary casually asked, "Did anyone hear about that murder over at the Nobility Motel?" I looked at Sally instantly. She flinched. Barely. But it was enough. Dave, on the other hand, was calm as ever. He asked if that was the same place we'd done some renovation work for a while back. I nodded and said it was. But I kept my eyes on Mary. She seemed serene. Too serene. And a strange thought crossed my mind. Did she already know about the affair? Was this her way of saying something without saying it? After dinner we all pitched in to clean up like we always did. Sally was at the sink, scrubbing dishes. Dave was next to her, drying them. Mary brought over the plates from the table, smiling softly, like nothing in the world was wrong. But everything felt wrong. It was like watching a play I knew the ending to, but none of the characters realized I was in the audience. That night, Sally came to me acting like everything was normal. She even tried to be close, romantically. All I could think about was how she and Dave might have been together just hours earlier. It made my skin crawl. I had to keep my composure, but inside I was breaking. They were both in my home that night, my wife and my best friend. Laughing. Sharing wine. Joking like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And they had no idea I knew. I couldn't take it anymore. I just lost it and bolted out of the house. My emotions had been bubbling under the surface for days, and suddenly they erupted. I needed air, space, anything that didn't remind me of the betrayal happening right under my nose. Somehow, I ended up at a quiet little diner we sometimes used for client lunches. That's where I ran into Debbie, one of our receptionists. Sweet girl, always polite, a bit shy but sharp. When she saw the state I was in, she didn't ask too many questions. She just sat across from me in the booth and gently held my hand. "You're talking about Miss Sally and Mr. Dave, aren't you?" she said, her voice low but steady. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She nodded as if she already knew. "Your wife, she's one of the most elegant, graceful women I've ever met," Debbie continued. "She always seems so put together. But Mr. Dave? I never liked how he looked at me. He gives me this weird feeling like he's trying to undress me with his eyes or something. He's never said anything wrong, but his stare? It's enough." I sat there quietly, listening. It was strange, liberating, almost. I was ashamed to admit it, but I didn't really know most of the people who worked for us anymore. Somewhere along the way, as the company grew, I had lost touch. I had no idea who I could trust, but for some reason I believed Debbie. Completely. Maybe it was her honesty. Or maybe I just needed someone, anyone, who didn't feel like part of the lie. "Thank you, Debbie," I murmured. Her words felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Someone else had seen something. I wasn't crazy. I leaned back in the booth and really looked at her for the first time, not just the receptionist but the person. There was something calming about her presence, like a quiet steadiness in the middle of my chaos. I managed a small grin. "You know," I said, "I've been thinking, maybe some of this is my fault. Maybe I haven't been the husband Sally needed. I've been buried in work for years. Always chasing deadlines. She's had to raise Dolly mostly on her own lately, especially with me being so distant." Debbie gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "I watch Dolly sometimes when I'm off or after classes," she said. "She's a great kid." I looked at her, then really looked. "Debbie, if you ever need anything, anything at all, you let me know, okay?" She smiled softly. "Thank you, Mr. John. What are you studying in school?" I asked. "Business administration for now," she said. "I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do yet. It's been tough, tuition's expensive and my savings are running thin. But I'll manage. I've got a good job now and that helps a lot." I chuckled and gave her my best imitation of an old Southern gentleman. "Sweetheart," I said, "I have a little proposition for you, if you're up for it." Her eyes lit up with amusement. "Yes, sir, Mr. John," she said, grinning. "Just tell me what you need. I'll report my progress later. If I finish before the end of the day, I'll let you know." I smiled at her enthusiasm. "Even if it takes all day, that's fine. While you're at it, maybe gather some comparison info on other daycares too, just for perspective." She nodded. "I usually stop at the cafe in the evenings. It's my only real meal most days. If I don't see you this afternoon, I said, I'll try to catch up with you there tonight. True to her word, she was back in the office by noon. And somehow, just knowing she was around gave me a little peace amid the storm. I studied him for a long moment before responding. You might be right about that, I said slowly. I've heard somewhere that under the right, or maybe the wrong circumstances, just about anyone could cheat. Men, women, doesn't matter. If they feel unloved, unappreciated, or just plain tempted at the right time. He nodded in agreement. She's got quite the following, he added. A whole crowd of guys always buzzing around her. That part I couldn't argue with. Yeah, I've noticed. Always have. She's had admirers from the day I met her. But she's my wife, I said, my voice trailing off. At least, she was supposed to be. Despite everything, the conference went smoothly. It was professional, productive, even enjoyable in moments. We mingled with old colleagues, shook hands, laughed at the right times. But underneath it all, I carried that heaviness in my chest. The truth hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be confirmed. Each day I made sure to check in with Debbie. We kept our calls short, but she always had an update. On Sunday morning, she told me she had finished gathering all the information I'd asked for. It'll be on your desk first thing Monday morning, she promised. That next day I was jittery, nervous like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every tick of the clock echoed in my head. Then I heard it, the distinct sound of high heels clicking down the hallway. It was like music in the middle of all the noise in my head. Debbie popped her head around the door frame earlier than expected and gave me a soft smile. Morning, boss. How are we doing today? She asked, stepping in. I sighed. Hard to say. I haven't looked at the investigator's report yet. Her smile faded, and her eyes drifted away from mine for a moment. Then she gave a small nod. That bad, huh? She looked up again and I saw it. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. I sat down and opened my center drawer. The brown envelope was sitting there, thick with answers. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I set it on the desk in front of me but didn't open it right away. Just then the office buzzer went off. Debbie's voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Forrester is here. Send her in, I replied. The door opened and Mary stepped inside. Debbie came in behind her and sat down quietly. I greeted Mary with a warm but serious tone. Mary, I'm glad you came. I need you here for this because what we're about to go over, it affects you too. Sally and Dave were already seated across from me, visibly tense. They exchanged awkward, almost fearful glances, their bodies rigid with anticipation. I nodded toward Debbie. I believe you've all met Miss Summers. She's been helping out while Marge is out on maternity leave. She's here today to take notes. I reached for the remote and pointed toward the TV monitor mounted on the wall. Now, I need all of you to watch this carefully. I hit play. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the monitor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Sally's face went pale. Dave's expression tightened. Mary watched without flinching. When it ended, I turned to Sally. Her eyes were wet and her lips trembled as she whispered, "Let me keep my share of the company. I'll step back. I'll be a silent partner. Just send me my portion when you pay out dividends." Then she turned to Mary, her voice cracking. "Mary, please. Please forgive me." Mary didn't speak right away. And in that moment, all I could do was sit there watching everything unravel. Sally's voice trembled as she buried her face in her hands. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered. "It's all because I'm just weak. I'm a weak woman, John. I threw away the best man I've ever known. I don't have anything left now. Nothing. My life feels over." Her words hung in the air, heavy and sad. "I was foolish," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "So foolish." I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just looked at her and quietly said, "Sally, you can keep the house. I couldn't live there now anyway. I'll gather my things once I find a place to stay." She nodded slowly, guilt etched into every line of her face. Later that day, Debbie came into my office to go over some updates. Her cheeks were a little pink and she had that thoughtful, serious look she got when something was on her mind. "I hope I got the promotion for more than just being affectionate," she said softly. I looked her in the eye. "You don't have to worry about that," I told her. "Your job doesn't, and never will, include anything like that. I promoted you because I believe in your ability. I need someone smart, capable, and trustworthy to help me run this place. That's you." And the truth was, promoting Debbie had been one of the best choices I'd made for the business. She might have been small in stature, but she moved through the office like a force of nature. She was efficient, direct, and had a knack for putting out fires before they ever reached my desk. She understood that my time was meant to be spent on creative leadership, not squabbles over office supplies or scheduling conflicts. She became my second set of eyes and ears, and I relied on her more than she probably even realized. One day, I called over to our facilities manager. "Hey, can you do me a favor? Bring me the keys to the executive lot." He hesitated for a second, then said, "I don't think we have a reserved space for that." I smiled. "Well, we do now. Go ahead and change the sign on Dave's old parking spot. Debbie's earned it." "Got it," he replied. That same afternoon, Debbie popped her head into my office again, this time with little Dolly holding her hand. "We're heading home," she said with a grin. I glanced up from my desk and jokingly pouted. "What? You're leaving already?" I stuck out my lip in mock sadness. Dolly looked up at me wide-eyed. "Mama, Mr. John is crying." Both of them laughed and Debbie asked, "What's wrong now?" I crossed my arms dramatically. Dolly didn't give me a goodbye kiss. That's what's wrong. Without missing a beat, Dolly giggled and ran straight toward me, arms outstretched. I scooped her up into my arms and gave her a quick spin as she wrapped her tiny arms around my neck. "I'm gonna use that move again someday," I teased. Debbie gave me a knowing smile. "John, you're playing me like a fiddle, aren't you?" "Not really," I said, smiling back. "Remember, you're the one who convinced me to consider daycare the first time we met. You've been pretty good at maneuvering me from the start." She looked down for a second, then back up with sincerity in her voice. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to push. Please don't be upset with me." "Debbie," I said gently, "I hired you for exactly that. To help me do the things I'd rather avoid. That's what a great assistant does. You keep me on track, make sure I'm ready for every meeting, send thank you notes and birthday cards without me having to ask. You've helped me keep this company running when everything else in my life was falling apart." She nodded and I could tell she understood. "And you do it all," I added, with heart. I watched her closely as I finally opened up, really opened up, and poured out everything I'd been holding in. My fears, my feelings, my regrets, it all came spilling out. As I spoke, something changed in her expression. That warm, genuine smile of hers stretched across her face, lighting up the room like sunshine after a long storm. Without a word, she jumped into my lap and kissed me, hard and full of feeling. Then, as if she couldn't contain her joy, she covered my face with a cascade of soft, fluttering kisses, laughing as she did. "John, honey," she said, her voice full of warmth, "I love you too. And so does Dolly. She loves you so much. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want that to be my life." She paused, her smile faltering just a bit, her tone turning more uncertain. "I don't always know how to please you. There's still so much I don't know about being close, about intimacy. You'll have to be patient with me, teach me." I felt the corners of my mouth twitching, and I realized I had the goofiest grin on my face. I couldn't help it. I kissed her again and she looked into my eyes and said softly, "John, I might not know everything about that kind of connection, but I do know this, you're the one I want." Then she giggled and jumped up. "Wait here, I need to give you a proper kiss. Be right back." She dashed out of the room and a few seconds later, came racing through the bedroom wrapped in a towel, laughing as she disappeared into the living room. Moments later, she returned with a small notebook clutched to her chest. She flipped the covers open, climbed back into bed beside me, and found the page she'd been looking for. "Look at this," she said, showing me a page titled Marriage Information. It was filled with handwritten notes. Names, addresses, phone numbers, hours of operation for the clerk of the court, notaries, even a section outlining steps needed for a license. She'd been planning, thinking, dreaming, maybe longer than I'd realized. "There's a line here about needing at least $5,000. Do we have enough time before everything closes today?" she asked excitedly. "If we don't make it today," I said, "we'll go first thing in the morning." She clapped her hands and beamed. "Wonderful." Debbie stepped in front of me and put her hands firmly on her hips, smirking. "Don't I get a say in all this?" "You sure do, sweetheart," I said with a chuckle. "You pick out what you like, or what you need, and I'll give my opinion. But your choice is final. Oh, and one more thing, you're getting a new wardrobe. That's non-negotiable." She laughed. "And Dolly? Tomorrow's her turn." While we were out shopping later, one of the sales assistants stared at me and shook her head, half in awe. "Where on earth did you find a guy like this?" Debbie glanced at me, then smiled at the woman. "I got lucky," she said. "I'd love him no matter what. But yes, he makes everything feel like home." That evening back at the house, she tried on some of her new clothes for me. She looked beautiful in every single outfit, casual or formal didn't matter. But there was one dress in particular. It fit her like it had been made just for her. The way it hugged her shape, the way it moved when she did, it was like watching poetry in motion. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something return. Hope. I had no doubt the money we'd spent was worth every penny. After all, there's something about seeing a joyful bride. It's one of life's simplest, most beautiful sights. Later that evening, once little Dolly had fallen asleep and the house had quieted down, I pulled Debbie gently into my lap. We exchanged a few tender kisses, unhurried and sweet. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close, just savoring the peace between us. Then I said softly, "Deb, maybe this would be a good time to call your mom. Let her know what's happening. About us." She thought about it for a moment, nodding slowly. "Yeah," she said. "She'll want to hear it from me." The next morning we got dressed up for the drive out to visit her parents. Dolly was adorable as always, wearing little black tights, black boots and a bright red ball cap over her golden curls, which Debbie had tied neatly into a ponytail. Debbie matched in her own way with sleek black leggings, tall black boots and her own red cap. The two of them together? They looked like a magazine ad for fall fashion, adorable and glowing with happiness. Debbie, on her own, looked stunning in that effortless, country casual way. She wore a pair of fitted jeans, a light blue button-down shirt, a navy blazer and a pair of white sneakers. Simple, classic and beautiful. As we pulled up to the old family home, Debbie guided me under the wide stone portico. The front door opened before we could even knock. A graceful older woman, followed by a kind-eyed older man, stepped out onto the porch. "Debbie," the woman called out, arms wide. "Hi, Mama," she said, beaming as she ran up to hug her. I stepped back to give them space, letting the grandmother soak up her time with Dolly, who eagerly climbed into her lap once we got inside. The house was warm, full of the smell of something baking and the sound of quiet laughter. Debbie looked over at me from across the room, her eyes shining, and smiled. I smiled back, knowing this moment mattered. The older man stepped over and extended his hand. "You probably don't remember me, but I think we've met," he said. "A few months ago, you gave a presentation on that clubhouse design for our country club." "Uncle Bill?" I asked with a laugh. "Just Bill now," he said, shaking my hand with a grin. "You made quite an impression." Lunch was a pleasant surprise, casual but warm, with easy conversation. Dolly seemed to take to her grandmother right away, and the two of them were already chatting like old friends by the time dessert was served. Watching them connect made my heart feel full in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Days passed peacefully after that until one afternoon at work, something caught my attention. I glanced up and saw the new secretary sitting at Debbie's old desk. Her face was tight, her eyes red. A few minutes later, she came into my office and quietly closed the door behind her. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "How's the new girl working out?" she asked, clearly nervous. "She's doing fine," I said with a gentle smile. "But," I added with a wink, "she doesn't quite have the same spark Debbie had." I meant it as a joke, a little moment of honesty, but I saw her lip tremble and a tear slip down her cheek. Immediately, I stood up and walked over, wrapping my arms around her in a comforting hug. "Hey," I said softly. "I was teasing. Really. Debbie's one of a kind. But that doesn't mean you're not doing great." She nodded into my shoulder and I knew I had to be more careful. No one could replace Debbie, not in that role, not in my life. She and Dolly, they had become my compass. My peace. A few hours later, right at closing time, I heard the familiar rhythm of heels clicking across the office floor. I looked up and there she was, Debbie, smiling at me from the doorway. "Hi, honey," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You ready to go home?" I didn't need to answer. I just stood up, grabbed my coat and took her hand. Because wherever she was, that's where home had become. "I sure am," I said, smiling as I reached for her hand. "Let's go." She took my arm and clung to it tightly as we strolled together down the hallway toward the elevator. It felt so natural, like we belonged that way. Once inside the elevator, which was already crowded with a few other tenants, Debbie leaned in close and pressed against me. She looked up with that soft, playful smile of hers and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied, and she giggled in that way that made my chest warm. "Me too," she added again like a little girl with a secret. One of the tenants, Irving, the senior partner from the law firm a few floors below, grinned and chimed in, "John, why don't you two just go get a room already?" We laughed along with him. It was lighthearted, playful, and it felt good to be seen together like that, like something real. But just as the doors opened and we stepped out, we ran into someone unexpected. Jeff. He'd been an old acquaintance of Debbie's and clearly he wasn't happy. "That little girl should be raised by her real parents," he said sharply. "Not by some stranger." Debbie turned toward him with calm resolve, her voice strong and steady. "You're wrong, Jeff. John isn't some stranger, he's Dolly's father. We've been together for 4 years. The only reason we didn't marry sooner was because John needed to finalize his divorce first." Jeff narrowed his eyes. "I know you from somewhere. You used to work at the Carter Brothers department store in Ocala. You were the manager in the women's shoe department." Debbie shook her head and crossed her arms. "Sorry, Jeff. I've never worked in Ocala. Not a day in my life. Before I worked for John, I was a secretary at an auto dealership in Gainesville." It was clear Jeff had made a mistake. But as tensions rose, he muttered something under his breath that sounded a lot like a threat. That's when Debbie stepped between us, her chin lifted. "Hey," she said boldly, "nobody threatens my baby or my man and walks away from it." She grabbed my hand, gently drying the small line of sweat forming in my palm, and looked at me with eyes full of emotion. "I almost lost you, didn't I?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tears welled in her eyes and began to roll silently down her cheeks. Her body trembled slightly and I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her and holding her until she calmed. She rested her head against my chest and let herself breathe again. Later that evening, I suggested she go get ready for bed while I checked the locks around the house. When I joined her, we curled up together under the covers, the room dark and quiet, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional whisper of shared thoughts. As we lay there, I brought up something I'd been thinking about. "You know," I said, "maybe we ought to look into getting concealed carry permits. Just for peace of mind." She nodded thoughtfully. "That might not be a bad idea." I also asked if she'd be willing to take a self-defense class, maybe even some martial arts training. She seemed open to it. A few days later we stopped by a local sporting goods store to look at handguns. Debbie picked one up and asked, "Can I try this one too?" Uncle Bill had one just like it, .32 caliber. I looked at the other in her hand. "That .380 you're holding? I actually like it better than the .32. They're almost identical really except for the cartridge." She turned the weapon in her hands and nodded. "Feels right. My dad used to say the most important thing isn't the size of the bullet, it's hitting the right spot. One accurate shot in the right place matters more than any fancy caliber." She smiled at that. "Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Uncle Bill used to carry an E. Johnson just like this one." Later that night, we were organizing her purse to fit the new setup for concealed carry. She was worried about space but I told her not to stress. "Well, we can fix that," I said. "I'll remove the silk lining on that side and shift your essentials to the other compartment. You could even buy similar purses and have them customized, just so you're always prepared even when you're all dressed up. If you ever want to carry a clutch, we'll make sure you're still protected." She looked at me with eyes full of admiration and whispered, "You always think of everything." And in that moment, her smile told me all I needed to know. We were building something real, something worth protecting. "I always feel safe with you," Debbie whispered one evening, her voice soft and full of conviction. "I look to you for protection, you're my hero." Before I could respond, the shop owner, who'd been eavesdropping just a bit while we browsed handguns, raised an eyebrow. "Can he really shoot that well?" Debbie looked straight at him, half smiling. "Let's just say, he can hit his target with a .40 caliber from a plastic grocery bag, twice the distance most folks can manage at a range." The man's jaw dropped and I just chuckled, not needing to say a word. It was a mix of pride and joy that she believed in me like that. One afternoon not long after, Debbie waltzed into my office with that mischievous sparkle in her eye. She quietly closed the door behind her, then without saying a word, climbed right into my lap, wrapped her arms around me and gave me a long, lingering kiss. When she finally pulled back, she looked into my eyes and said, "I checked everything. We're in great shape financially, professionally, everything. I also stopped taking the pill." She paused, searching my face. "And now? I want to take a week's vacation. Anywhere you want. Just the two of us." I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, Mrs. Dynamo. You're planning this one. What do you have in mind?" She grinned wide. "Someplace tropical. Warm beaches, blue water, fishing, maybe even a little snorkeling." I laughed. "Sounds like paradise." "Good," she said, her smile turning proud. "Because I already booked it. We're leaving Friday, 2 days from now, out of Gainesville. Delta flight. Non-stop." I just stared at her, amazed. You never stopped surprising me. You never just tolerated me, she whispered. You adored me. I know it. I feel it every day. I teased her gently, nudging her with my shoulder. Well, maybe if you were just a little bit taller. She playfully swatted my chest. Oh please. You could be in movies if you wanted. Maybe they'd get that handsome beach guy to audition for my role, huh? I laughed. Beach guy? You really couldn't believe he was real, huh? Not for a second. I've never even seen anyone like that in pictures, she replied, shaking her head. Then her face got serious again. Do you want me to call our attorney and have him fax over your divorce papers? I know it's hard, but I'll do it. I looked at her and said firmly, I'll never sign anything that risks losing you. I won't touch another woman. I won't let one touch me. You're it for me. She smirked. You sure you're not trying to get a role in some adult drama? Only if you're the co-star, I shot back. The playful moment passed and soon we were back visiting Deb's mother and Uncle Bill. That's when I heard Dolly's little voice calling out, Daddy? I turned just in time to catch her running toward me. I scooped her up into my arms, holding her tight as she burst into tears of happiness. Debbie stepped in, wrapping us both in her embrace. It was one of those moments, the kind that stays in your heart forever. Deb's mom and Uncle Bill stood nearby, smiling at the scene. It felt like family. Real, grounded, and full of love. Once things settled, we all went inside. Over coffee and pie, they shared how wonderful Dolly had been while we were away. She was the perfect little girl, her grandmother said, brushing Dolly's hair back. She had a great time, but she missed you too terribly. Dolly sat quietly for a moment, then looked up at us. Can I have a little sister? Or maybe a brother? She asked innocently. I was caught off guard, but a huge smile broke out on my face before I could even respond. I looked at Debbie, who was already giggling, her eyes sparkling. I'm hoping that grin means you're as happy as Dolly is, she said softly. Without another word, I jumped up, ran around Debbie, and scooped Dolly up into my arms. Mama's gonna have a baby? I shouted, twirling her around. Hooray! We danced around the room, laughing and celebrating like it was Christmas morning. Debbie sat back, laughing until her cheeks were pink. Dolly ran over, climbed into her lap, and kissed her on the cheek. I leaned in and kissed her too. And in that moment, my eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of absolute joy. I stepped back from the warmth of the moment, turning toward the window and gazing out quietly. My thoughts drifted deeper than the view outside. What did this really mean for us? What kind of father would I be this time around? Debbie's previous pregnancy had been something she'd endured almost entirely alone. She told me once that she was terrified, uncertain, unsupported, and just trying to survive each day without falling apart. But this time? Everything was different. Now she had me by her side. I could take care of her, be her partner in all the ways she needed. And I was determined to do it right. She seemed genuinely happier, lighter. If she had any bouts of morning sickness, I never saw them. She carried herself with this quiet confidence, this glow that everyone around us noticed. People would stop her in the halls just to compliment her, how radiant she looked, how at peace she seemed. At work, it became clear pretty quickly that productivity was going to take a hit, but not because of Debbie. The entire building seemed to rally around her. Nobody would let her lift a single thing. Doors were opened for her, chairs were pulled out, and every little need she had was met before she even asked. People were fiercely protective of her. It was touching. Sometimes comical. And then came the day everything changed. Debbie and I were at the bank, just a regular visit, running errands, nothing unusual, when it happened. A group of masked robbers stormed the place, guns drawn, shouting, demanding control. Chaos broke out in an instant. People screamed, ducked, tried to find cover. One man, someone near the entrance, was shot in the chest and dropped where he stood. My instinct kicked in. Debbie and I had both gone through firearm training, and we were both carrying, legally and responsibly. In that moment there wasn't time to think. Only act. Debbie pulled me down behind a desk and looked me over quickly. Are you hit? She asked. I was about to ask you the same thing. She shook her head and huffed. No. But I ruined a brand new pair of pantyhose and a good purse. Even in that moment I had to smile. That was Debbie, tough, calm, sharp as ever. I checked her over and found she wasn't physically hurt, just shaken. The police arrived minutes later. Debbie and I calmly surrendered our weapons and gave full statements. The bank manager approached the officers immediately, backing us up. He told them we had saved lives, many lives, with what we did. 6 customers had been shot. Tragically, one didn't make it. But 5 robbers had been stopped before they could do even more damage. The driver of the getaway car was gunned down as well, having fired recklessly toward the crowd outside. Footage from the bank's interior confirmed our story and captured the entire sequence. One final robber was found bleeding behind a desk, injured but expected to survive. That afternoon, the sheriff's office held a press conference and asked us to attend. All the major news outlets were there. They offered us the opportunity to speak if we wanted. Debbie didn't say much publicly, she never liked the spotlight, but I said a few words about staying calm, protecting innocent people, and doing what was necessary. Afterward, life began to slowly return to normal, or as normal as it could get. Johnny, our son, was growing fast. He was a sweet, gentle baby who rarely cried. He smiled at just about anyone who glanced his way and had a laugh that could melt a glacier. I often found myself peeking through Deb's office door just to watch her rocking him while typing with one hand. She somehow made it look effortless. One morning I was running late getting Dolly to daycare. I stopped by Debbie's office before heading into mine and saw her sitting on the couch, feeding Johnny. The little towel she used for cover had slipped just slightly as she balanced a phone call and soothed him. I was about to step in when I noticed Jamal Washington, one of our project leads, sitting nearby, not even trying to hide that he was watching her. His eyes locked on her in a way that made me uncomfortable. I stepped in, calmly adjusted the towel, and made sure he knew I was there. The air in the room shifted. That moment stuck with me. Later, I took a long walk along the beach. The crowds had thinned out, and the soft hiss of waves against the shore gave me space to think. My mind was tangled. Debbie seemed captivated by Jamal at times, or maybe I was just being paranoid. Was there something I wasn't seeing? Could I really go through another heartbreak? She left, would she take the kids with her? Could I survive that? I sat down on a piece of driftwood, the sand warm beneath me, and leaned back, staring out at the horizon. I kept wondering, what's wrong with me? Why can't I keep a wife? Later that evening, I overheard a conversation between Betty and Debbie that cracked the tension inside me like a ray of light through clouds. Betty whispered, "Well, he is kinda cute." Debbie laughed. "Cute, huh? You know I've got dibs on John, right? He only gets fixed up with me." They both burst out laughing. Betty leaned closer and said, "I think Jamal saw John at the pool party. And he was definitely impressed by what he saw." Debbie grinned and replied, "Well, of course he was. That's my husband." That's when I stepped into view. "Ladies," I said, "I don't care if Mr. Jamal is impressed or depressed, I am in no manner or form available." They laughed again and Debbie reached for my hand, her eyes soft. I was still hers.